I've been sharing my painting journey here for a little while now, and today I thought I'd try something a little different, a tutorial style video. This is the shorter version of the tutorial, perfect if you're short on time or just want to enjoy a quicker look at the painting coming together. If you like to follow along in real time, the full-length tutorial is linked in the top right corner. There's a small island here with a few trees growing from it. I'm just blocking in the shape first. If you're interested, I've added a few Amazon affiliate links in the description. I earn a small commission if you decide to use them. First up, I'm laying down a wash of cadmium yellow hue using a big soft brush. This one is a size 10. Next, I'm adding some cadmium red pale hue just above the yellow, letting the two colors meet. Now I'm adding a little alizarin crimson hue, really diluted with plenty of water. The paper is still nice and wet at this stage, so the colors are blending together really smoothly. I'm just letting them settle into each other without too much fuss. That softness is exactly what I'm after here. I'm adding a bit more cadmium red here to deepen the color, but I'm being careful not to cover up too much of that yellow. I still want that warm glow to come through near the horizon. I'm adding a bit more yellow here. As I build up the oranges and reds, the yellow started looking a little too muted. I'm just continuing to build up the colors now, layering a little more of each to bring in some extra vibrancy. I'm dabbing off a little paint in a few areas to let some light show through the clouds. I'm just touching up a few little spots where there's a bit too much white showing through. When I paint reflections, I try to make sure they are a little darker than the sky above. They actually appear that way in real life, especially on still water. So I'm using slightly more pigment here just to give the reflection a bit more weight and depth. Moving on to the mountains, I'm mixing a bit of alizarin crimson with intense blue to get a nice muted purple for the distant shapes. I'm starting with the distant mountains first, using a size 4 brush and a fairly diluted mix. I want to keep them nice and soft so they sit back in the scene. I like to do the reflections at the same time while the color is still fresh. I'm switching to a smaller brush now. It's a size 3. I'm using the same alizarin crimson and intense blue mix to add a few gentle ripples to the water. Just keeping the strokes horizontal and light so they hint at movement without pulling too much attention. I've started working on the second mountain on the left. It's a little closer than the last one. Making the reflections a little darker. Mixing up another puddle now. Alizarin crimson again with a bit more intense blue this time to make a slightly cooler, darker mix. For the reflection, I'm leaving a thin white line between the base of the mountain and the water. It helps create that soft separation and a sense of stillness. Adding more intense blue for an even darker mix and painting in the small island on the left. I've let the paper dry again before moving on, just to keep the edges clean. Now I'm mixing up some more alizarin crimson with water to paint the furthest mountain and its reflection, keeping it fairly light and soft. I'm also darkening parts of the water just a little. I'm mixing up a slightly lighter version of the colour I used for the island on the left, just a bit more water to soften it. With that, I'll start painting the next mountain. It's still fairly subtle, so it sits nicely in the distance without overpowering the scene. Adding a bit more alizarin crimson to paint our last mountain. Adding another layer of colour to darken it a bit. Adding more intense blue to darken the mix. This area needs slightly more defined edges, so I'm just using the very tip of my brush to sharpen a few lines. Drying the paper once again. I'm darkening the foreground mountain now, just adding a bit more intense blue to the mix to deepen the tone. As I go, I'm also adding a little texture with the brush, nothing too detailed, just enough to hint at some movement and shape in the landscape. Now I'm switching to a number 2 brush and using Payne's Grey to start adding some trees. These are just simple silhouettes. I'm keeping the shapes loose and natural, using upward strokes to suggest trunks and branches without too much detail. The trees in the reflection are even looser, Just soft shapes to suggest their form without pulling focus. Using Payne's Grey and the same brush, I'm going to add in a few more trees. I always seem to struggle a little with painting trees. I can never quite decide how much detail to put in or how loose to keep them. It's one of those things where some days it flows easily, and other days it feels like I'm overthinking every branch. What about you? Does painting trees come naturally, or do you find them a bit tricky too? I think the challenge is also part of what keeps it interesting. There's always another way to suggest shape and texture without getting too caught up in the tiny details. Often, when I paint, I start with a quick and simple pencil sketch of whatever's in my mind. It's not detailed, just enough to capture the main shapes and layout. Then I transfer this to the watercolor paper and try to bring it to life with paint. It doesn't always turn out exactly how I pictured it, but more often than not, it's not too far from the image in my mind. And sometimes it even surprises me in a good way. I'm using a white uniball here to add a little separation between the water and mountains, and to pop in a few sparkles across the surface. This island really needs to be a bit darker with some extra texture. Thanks for sharing this painting time with me. Until next time, may calm skies and quiet reflections stay with you.